recording, and I'm going to share the screen. Oh, I look afraid. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and get started. About 5:22. I had it scheduled for 5:20. Our Zoom room here. Okay. So, welcome to actually, at this point, it'll be the recording. I don't have anybody on the line with me here. We'll go through our Zoom room. I did want to touch base on a few things. I'll give you a quick overview of what I want to touch on. One is last week's discussion. Mainly, I wanted to talk about the monoism versus dualism. We had, I think, a very interesting discussion and a fair amount of diversity in our thought. Probably a little bit higher percentage of folks tipped their hat to dualism, but we had a fair amount of people who thought monism was the way to go. And it's interesting that some people use Bible texts. In fact, many people use Bible texts to support their position or to sort of explain how they came to that conclusion. And some of the Bible texts could be used either way, depending on kind of your beliefs. So I thought that was very interesting. Many times when I teach, I've taught general psych, we pretty much always talk about monism versus dualism at Central Christian College and some other universities that I've taught at through the years. And that, anyway, we typically will discuss dualism and monism. So probably most of the time, people who of a Christian faith believe in dualism, and most Christian faiths would, if you really got into the theology and talked to the theologians in Catholicism or Baptists, Methodists, Lutherans, of course, they're going to tip their hat, if you will, or side or cling to the idea of dualism. The reason is because, as they understand in their faith, that once we die, then our soul leaves our earthly body or our flesh and goes somewhere, depending on your faith, may go to heaven, may go to hell, may go to purgatory. And that is typically what the average Christian on the street believes. I think probably if you talk to many people who profess to be Christians, but maybe not experts in their faith, I think they're going to side with dualism. Now, interestingly enough, when you really look at what the Bible teaches, you find a lot of evidence for monism. In fact, most theologians are going to agree, whether Christian theologians or Jewish theologians, or even Muslim theologians for that matter. The Jewish faith believes in monism. Everything in the Old Testament, and some would argue even in the New Testament, many people would argue that, point to monism. In fact, I guess the point I'll make is the characters in the Bible, the stories that we know, like for instance, Mary and Martha and Lazarus, believed in monism. They believed that Lazarus was dead, and he would not be seen until he was risen again. When the Messiah came, they didn't necessarily realize they were talking to the Messiah. Maybe they did. That's a debate for a different class. But even looking at what Paul talked about, and even the earlier David and Solomon, looking at their writings, the old Jewish writings, they believed in monism. They believed that the body and the spirit and the soul were just different parts of the same entity. Christian belief and some Christian theologians, have come along, and they have said that is not really how it is. And this is not a class on theology, but I did just want to point out that there are many supports from Scripture that people can use for to arrive at monism or dualism. They can use it for. I certainly have my point of view. I tend not to share it too much specifically. That's not what this course is about. But I will point out this also, that one of the students in the class, and he or she, I forget exactly, I think it was she, posted in the discussion, you can go back and look at it. And this is a scripture that's often used to support dualism. When Jesus is on the cross, looking, if you're going to look for a Christian faith to either support dualism or monism, when Jesus is on the cross, and the account is pretty, well, not pretty, it's very consistent in all four Gospels that talk about the cross and the crucifixion. Jesus is there, and there are two other people there, thieves that have been accused and convicted of crimes. Probably they were a little bit more of, had issues bigger than just being a thief. I think it's more than they stole a loaf of bread. Who knows? The crucifixion was, a brutal punishment, and Romans didn't hesitate to dole it out. But one tends to believe that these guys probably had committed many crimes and plotted murders, perhaps, and maybe even committed murders. There are some who believe that one of the thieves had worked with Barabbas to try and wreak havoc on the Roman government. I've heard different people preach that, if you will. I can't say for sure, that I've investigated that. Could well be. I don't know. Nonetheless, so one thief continues to mock Jesus, and the other thief says, "Please have compassion on me and remember me." And Jesus says, "Well, I tell you today that you'll be with me in paradise," which would tend to lend its support to dualism. But those who, I've heard the debate, who promote monism say, well, wait a second. I think that, obviously we know that Jesus wasn't speaking English. In the translation, there should be a comma there to say that I tell you today, like I'm telling you right now, that you will be with me in paradise at some point in the future, would be the indication. And the support for that is in John, forget exactly where, but in the Gospel of John, and I wrote it down. You can see that I did reference it when I made my reply to the student. When Jesus rises from the grave on the third day, he says to Mary, I have not ascended to my Father yet, which would indicate that he couldn't have possibly been in paradise with the thief on the cross. Now, we can get into big debates on that. Like I said, we could debate this for a year. Debate, maybe not the right word, but investigate and look and learn and discuss and try and figure out what all that means. And I do encourage you to have what I call sincere and courageous studies of the Bible. I have done that over the years. By no means have I arrived, but I've learned a lot in the last 25 years when I really started to really search the Bible. Until then, I was doing okay, but I've learned a lot about that. Anyway, so I'll just close the discussion with this, and then we'll get into some other things. Even us who I'm not a theologian, and none of the students have professed to be theologians who this is all they do. This is what they do day in and day out, if you will. Cardinals and bishops in the Catholic religion, Lutheran people, Protestant people who study the Bible, Jewish rabbis who study the Bible. They don't even have a consensus on this. And they study the same scriptures and philosophies and ideas. So it doesn't surprise me that we're not going to come to a consensus after a week, when we certainly have other assignments to do and other obligations in our lives, family and career and those kind of things, kids and what have. So I really enjoyed the discussion. So I do want to commend you for that. Very good discussion all along. So as I mentioned last week, and I used the term the long arm of psychology. A Psych 101 course covers many things, and we go a little bit deep into it, but we can't possibly go as deep as you will go later on in your study of psychology if you decide to pursue it. Like I mentioned last week, we're going to study some social psychology, we're going to study some clinical psychology, we're going to study sports psychology and personality psychology, school psychology, all those things. So the things that we touched on a little bit last week, and again, this course is it's not because this course is abbreviated. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. This is a 6-week course, but we're putting an entire semester into this course. The way that the Central Christian College program is set up, it's not like the traditional college where you'll take say 5 classes in a semester, and you'll take them all at the same time. You just take them, some Monday, Wednesday, Friday, some Tuesday, Thursday, or whatever. Like, and you have to kind of juggle things. You're probably taking 1 or 2 classes, maybe 3 here at Central Christian. Some of you might just be taking 1. So you're kind of packing it all in, and then you go on to the next one, rather than having, to juggle math and reading and science. So I understand you're getting a full semester of psychology, of general psychology here, but in any semester in any university, you as I mentioned, it's a survey course. You're going to cover many things, deep to some extent, but you'll go deeper down the road. So this week we're talking about a little bit more on the clinical side, and we're not going to get into everything here over time. Okay, but one of the things that I think resonates more with you than some of the other things right now today is the heavy cost of not sleeping. There is a lot of discussion about adults not getting enough sleep in clinical psychology, as well as industrial and organizational psychology, because it totally impacts adults' lack of sleep impacts their job performance and job satisfaction. There's also a lot in the literature, even pop literature like Psychology Today and educational psychology, where we realize our children are not getting enough sleep, and that impacts their ability to learn. So a lack of sleep impacts our body and makes us not feel good, so that in and of itself, from the clinical standpoint, is problematic, yes? And then you look at more globally, it impacts our education system because it impacts our students, also impacts business and industry, because there have been studies that show how much it costs businesses because employees, their associates, aren't getting enough, are coming in tired. And what's the reason for this? Then we get into some very interesting things, which I'm going to get into in a second. But I have had this slide. If I want to reference this slide, it can impair safety. So driving a car, operating machinery, making a pot of coffee, for that matter. That when you're sleepy and you have had sleep deprivation, when you first wake up, you kind of finding your way around. Of course, when you first wake up, you're sleepy, you're still groggy. So those things happen. But oftentimes, what I'm talking about is someone who looks fully alert. They've had a shower, they've combed their hair, they brushed their teeth, they got their clothes on, shirt and tie, whatever have you, pantsuit, professional attire for a woman or a man, and their mind is not fully awake though. So that's the thing that's more problematic, because they even fool themselves. I'm okay, I drove to work okay, but then again, people run stop signs because they're actually sleeping, or not sleeping, but they're sleepy, making mistakes at work, Operating heavy equipment can be a problem if you're not fully alert. There's even studies that say even when you've had a good night's sleep, um, you're most alert and most effective about the first 3 hours of your workday, of your shift. Pardon me. If you're a construction worker or if you're an attorney or or you're a doctor, the first 3 hours are your most productive and most efficient and most effective. Uh, so that's important. We know that most mistakes, just even if people have adequate sleep, and we're looking at typical population, most mistakes occur after 6 hours of work. When you think of police shift work, I know we have at least two classmates involved in law enforcement in this class, and a lot of what we talk about has applications to all the different fields, including law enforcement. I'm going to mention law enforcement right now. I think the two guys here, one is a sheriff or works the deputy sheriff. The other, I think, is also maybe sheriff or maybe police. Anyway, nonetheless. Um, there's no, we've had all kinds of things in the news recently, in the last couple of years, especially about police violating or being accused of violating civil rights. And then we've also had the other end of it where people have really been attacking police. I think that most rational, in fact, I'm sure I'm going to go on a limb here and say all rational people believe and want adequate police protection, as well as want police to be able to do their job without fear of, getting hurt, killed. Um, and I think most rational people would agree that in any profession, some people make bad choices. Um, so having said all that, and I don't want to get too much into it, but looking at in terms of sleep deprivation, one of the things that I'm passionate about this, um, I think, and in fact, I'm sure the studies will show you that most complaints, most mistakes in the police work, just like anything else, happen towards the end of the shift or happen when someone's tired. So I say all that to say this: something as important as our protecting our community, protecting and serving. I would recommend, and I think we can approach this from a psychological standpoint. It'll be interesting to see if anyone has feedback. Why is it that we decide 8-hour shifts for people? Okay, well, they have factory workers, whatever have you. That was okay for a while. It may still be okay, but why do we have it say for police officers? I have some friends who are police officers, and they do 10-hour shifts. They do 4 10-hour shifts. The reason they do that is the department, points out that it's more cost effective. But when someone's, on that 6-hour through 10th hour, you know what? The guy, I don't care who you are, you're just simply not as sharp. Simply not as sharp as you were the first, 60% of your shift, or even, well, so that's 40% of your shift. So, when looking at how to apply some of this, and again, this can be applied, I think the police department is a very dramatic and, I think it resonates with a lot of people. Same could be said of education for that matter. Why don't we go to 6-hour shifts for police officers? I think that would serve the community better. I can make the case for that. It may cost us a little bit more, but we have to weigh the cost and the benefits. Anyway, that's just thinking about how real this is and the application of sleep deprivation. So right here, I'm just going to do 20 to 60% of road accidents involve sleep deprivation. 20 to 60%. The Exxon Valdez, Challenger, 3 Mile Island, and Chernobyl all involve sleep deprivation. The Exxon Valdez, I'm sure you recall, was the oil tanker that wrecked because of the captain, the crew, not being alert and spilled tons of oil into the ocean. The Challenger, of course, that was a space shuttle Challenger. 3 Mile Island was the nuclear plant up in the northeast part of the country. Chernobyl, of course, was probably the worst nuclear accident, I'm sure, in history of the world over in Russia. Those are also very dramatic. So it's important to get adequate sleep. It's important for ourselves, and it's important for society. Here's the thing: more and more, we're sleeping less and less. And there's a number of reasons for this that could be addressed. Like I mentioned, police officers and shift work, and part of that is because of you bring in economy, and if things were better, we could hire more police officers to alleviate some of the stress. Part of it is the technology with our kids. They're up till 1, 2 o'clock in the morning on their phones or the computer. Now, typically the phones, either on Twitter, Instagram. Kids don't use Facebook that much anymore, or playing games, and it is addictive. That's a talk for another time. But so they're not getting enough sleep. For us, for you and me, a lot of times it's because people are working second jobs. This is a second job for me. I teach a lot. I don't see it that way. I'm a professional educator, and I'm involved with different universities and institutions as a professional. But there are many people who have to go to their job and work in an office for 9 to 5, and then they go work at a grocery store 3 or 4 nights a week, and that that weighs on you. That makes you more tired. That causes sleep deprivation. Taking overtime, or now people they go to work their 9 to 5 job, and then they'll go drive an Uber car until midnight, just to make ends meet. So the economy's impacted that. And that's regardless of what side of the political argument, people I think can agree that. In fact, there's not even agree or disagree. The data supports that more people are working, are moonlighting and doing second jobs. So psychology definitely. This course, while we can't get too deep into many things, I do want to point out that psychology is a very important topic, and it's not just is it monism or dualism. I mean, that's kind of a philosophical question. There's application for that, certainly from a religious standpoint. But when we get into these other things like sleep deprivation and some of the other things we're going to get on, I won't go too much. You got to understand how important this can be. So anyway, I won't belabor that anymore. I feel kind of out of my league. I'm just talking. So, there are reasons that we dream. That's a fascinating topic. Different theories there. You can go over that. We don't really have time to go over it here. Now, we could spend, I'm not going to be on much longer, but we could talk a lot about the psychoactive drugs and the opioid epidemic in this country. There was a time a few years ago when I would say to myself, well, at some point I'll just move to like Vermont or New Hampshire where there's no drug problems, or now it's everywhere. It's middle class students, middle class families, that are impacted by this. So, wait, yep, you can use this. So, no longer can we just say, you know what, I'm moving out of New York or Chicago, to get away from the drug problem. It is across the country now. It is an epidemic. And a lot of it is at least started with legal drugs or prescription drugs. And, you don't have to look very far to find some of the problems. Even in this class, most of you are kind of like in the Midwest, Kansas State or Missouri, or even some of our, one of our law enforcement officers is, I think, from Oklahoma. That's another place I thought, well, I could just go to Oklahoma where these kind of things, just aren't a problem. But I would imagine if they were on the line right now, they would tell you that they have to contend with drug dealers and um, drug overdoses, and the things that come with that, unfortunately, very unfortunately. Um, I mean, we could, again, I'll talk a minute about hypnosis, and then we're going to wrap it up. There's a whole, we can even have the discussion if more people on here of whether or not legalized marijuana is a good idea or a bad idea. Um, I mean, I won't get into it too much, but everyone has, seen, I don't know if everyone has a strong opinion, but many people have strong opinions about that. Hypnosis is also just a fascinating topic. And again, it's not just something that is um, in theory or along those lines. Hypnosis can be a tremendous benefit. People have actually have less pain-killing medicine for operations. You can actually control your heart rate through hypnosis, and your blood pressure, and things such as that. It can be a wonderful, wonderful tool for mindfulness, relaxation, and biblically, the Bible says, God counsels us to be still and know that I am God. He spoke to a prophet. And again, we rush around so much and are so tired, rushing to and fro, that how much have we lost in our lifetime? This idea, let's just sit on the porch for a minute and just relax. It's really, the more I look around, the more anxiety I see, because people, well, I say partly because people are just always have to be busy. Sometimes they're going to work, and I'll say this about the second job as well. Trying to hit both sides of any kind of a quote unquote debate. We also have to wonder, for some folks who are working extra or working longer hours to sell more insurance or sell more cars or more T-shirts or whatever the case may be, how much is enough? Do we have to have a $40,000 car and a 5-bedroom, 4-bathroom house? We're so consumer driven, at least in the Western world, in America especially, that's why people work all these jobs. There's been many studies looking at families who are 2-income families, say the mom and the dad both working because they got to pay for the kids, this, that, and the other. Are they really making more money to have 2 incomes by both parents? If one parent stayed home, traditionally it was the woman, it wouldn't have to be necessarily. But if one person stayed home and really was a housekeeper, what we used to sometimes jokingly call a domestic engineer. And by that I mean, okay, so let's say mom and dad both work. Let's say, just for example, they both make $50,000. Sometimes one makes less than that. In some cases, one makes 60, one makes 40. So have one stay home. Well, that's $40,000 we just lost. Well, yes, but now we can get by with one car, so we don't need that other money for the car, or the insurance, or the tires, or the gas for the car, much less the payments. The person who's staying home can now plan meals more effectively, so that when 2 people are working, a lot of times I'm so tired too. Let's take the family out to dinner. Happens very often. So if one person's staying home, they could plan a meal, prepare the meal, could shop wisely, cutting coupons. I mean, in these days, we're so consumer driven, people use coupons and Groupons. There's a good argument, and I've read many a case study where people have actually ended up, in a better financial situation by having one of the partners stay home. But when they stay home, they're just, not watching Oprah all day long or whatever's on TV, not to disparage anybody, but they're actually proactively seeking ways to manage the money also. I mean, even, that person now becomes sort of the family accountant, looking for the best investments, if there's any money left for investments, looking for the best deals for clothes, again, food, appliances. The other part of it is, to support that partner. It makes emotionally a little bit easier. In addition to, okay, rather than call the plumber, I looked up on YouTube on how to fix this. It's not that hard. I'm gonna rather than pay a plumber $400, I'm gonna go buy a certain tool for 120 that we'll hang on to, and I can fix this for some of the small things. So anyway, that getting into sort of mindfulness, which is the catchphrase now in business and everything else, which goes along with hypnosis. All right, there's so many things we could go over. I'm going to let you guys get off of here now. We're going to go with our Bible. Whew, I'm tired now. Our Bible verse. We're going to go with Micah 6:8. Look that up if you'd like. Just if you mention Micah 6:8, you'll get the credit. But I do encourage you to look up what that scripture says and enjoy. So please know you can always get me. Best place is through the message tab in the course room. That's what I check 2 or 3 times a day, typically at least once a day. I don't always get to my email. If you email me, I don't see it typically. I don't recognize the name that comes up, and I get so many emails. Lots of times it gets buried, and I don't want to miss a message from you. So if it's a message tab, I'll definitely see what it is. I'm pretty much caught up. In fact, I'm sure I'm caught up as of an hour ago, unless somebody has sent me a message in the last hour. I'm praying for you. I'm looking forward to the rest of this week, and keep up the good work.